"Excuse me?" one of the guests whispered, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. The entire table had gone silent. The woman at the head, the billionaire CEO everyone had been eager to meet, had just spoken, but nobody understood her. Her voice was calm, commanding even, yet every word that left her lips was in Korean. She continued speaking, her sentences flowing naturally, as if she expected comprehension. But around her, the other CEOs, investors, and dignitaries exchanged helpless glances. Some smiled awkwardly, others shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. A man coughed into his napkin to fill the silence. Finally, the host leaned in. I'm sorry, he stammered. None of us seem to... He gestured vaguely with his hands, embarrassed. We don't understand Korean. The billionaire CEO paused, her eyes scanning the table. She tilted her head slightly, as though surprised, but she didn't switch languages. Instead, she repeated herself firmly, still in Korean. A ripple of unease spread across the table. The dinner, meant to celebrate international cooperation, was collapsing into awkwardness. Every guest had prepared speeches, proposals, and praise for her achievements, but no one had prepared for this. The wait staff, dressed in crisp uniforms, moved quietly between the tables. One of them, a young black waitress balancing a tray of wine glasses, slowed as she noticed the uncomfortable scene. Her brows furrowed. She listened closely, her steps hesitating. The CEO spoke again, her words carrying urgency now. Her voice wasn't angry, but it demanded attention. She was trying to communicate something important. Yet her audience sat frozen, trapped in polite confusion. That's when the waitress set her tray down carefully on the side table. She took a step closer, her heart pounding. For a moment she hesitated. Should she really speak up in a room filled with billionaires and world leaders? But the CEO's words rang in her ears. She understood them perfectly. Clearing her throat, the waitress said softly, "She's asking why no one has responded to her proposal." The entire table turned to stare at her. Forks clinked against plates. The host blinked in disbelief. "You understood her?" he asked. The waitress nodded. "Yes, she's speaking Korean. I studied it for years." The billionaire CEO's eyes finally lit up. She looked directly at the waitress and, for the first time all evening, her expression softened into a faint smile. She spoke again, this time addressing the waitress. The words came faster now, sharper, as though she had been holding back. The waitress listened, then translated carefully. She said she expected to be understood here because her company had sent all communications in Korean. She feels disrespected that no one prepared. A murmur spread around the table. Faces reddened. Some guests shifted in their seats, ashamed. Others glanced toward the host, silently blaming him. The CEO continued, her tone unwavering. She says, the waitress translated slowly, that business is not only about money, but about respect. If you invite someone to your table, you should make an effort to meet them halfway. The words hit the room like a stone dropped in still water. And in that moment, every guest realized his dinner was no longer just about business. The French investor at the far end of the table leaned back in his chair, lips twisting into a smirk. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for others to hear. "Why play games with language when we're here for business?" The CEO's sharp gaze darted to him. Her tone, though still in Korean, carried unmistakable steel. The waitress hesitated, then translated carefully. She says it's not a game. She says leaders who cannot adapt are not leaders at all. She says if your arrogance blinds you, then you'll pay the price for it in business and in life. The Frenchman's smirk faltered. He looked down at his plate, stabbing at his steak without another word. A German executive tried to smooth things over. "Surely she knows English," he said nervously. "It's the language of commerce, after all. Why doesn't she just—" The waitress interrupted softly, translating the CEO's immediate reply. "She says English is not the language of commerce. Respect is. She says she will not erase herself to make others comfortable." The German man flushed, taken aback. He sat back down, silent. The atmosphere at the table had shifted. Moments ago, the guests had felt confident, powerful. Now, each word from the CEO, delivered to the young waitress, stripped away their pretenses. The Dubai billionaire, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward, desperation in his tone. "Please tell her that I am willing to provide interpreters for every meeting from this day forward. I'll spare no expense. She must not walk away." The waitress translated, her voice steady. The CEO listened, then gave a short, dry laugh. Her answer was firm. She says money cannot buy respect. She says if you did not value her language before tonight, you cannot convince her you value it now. The Dubai investor slumped back in his seat, humiliated. The host of the evening, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers, finally rose. His hands trembled slightly as he raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with forced cheer, "let's not let misunderstandings cloud the purpose of this evening. We are here for unity." But before he could continue, the CEO's voice cut through again, and the waitress translated with clarity. She says unity without respect is nothing more than hypocrisy. The host froze, his words dying in his throat. He lowered his glass slowly, his face pale. The room grew unbearably tense. No one moved. The only sound was a clinking of glasses from the far side of the hall where other guests dined, blissfully unaware of the storm at the central table. The waitress stood firm, though her heart raced. She had never spoken so much in a room like this, never stood in the spotlight. Yet now every eye was on her, and every word she carried mattered. The CEO's gaze softened as she looked at the waitress. Then, in Korean, she said quietly, almost warmly, "You're the only one here who chose to listen." The waitress blinked, taken aback, then translated aloud. She says, "I'm the only one here who chose to listen." Gasps rippled around the table. For the billionaires present, it was an indictment. For the waitress, it was an honor. A powerful silence followed. Then the CEO leaned forward, speaking again, slower this time, deliberate. The waitress translated. She says this dinner was not just about contracts. It was a test. She wanted to see who would make the effort, who would approach her as an equal, not as a commodity. She says tonight, you have shown her everything she needs to know. The investors' faces fell. Some shifted nervously. Others glanced at one another, panic in their eyes. Billions of dollars were at stake, yet none of their power mattered in this moment. The waitress hesitated before adding her own words, softly, almost trembling. She doesn't need all of you. She only needs those who respect her. And right now, none of you have proven that. The CEO's lips curved into faintest smile. She gave a single nod of approval. The tension exploded. Several guests spoke at once, desperate to defend themselves. "This is unfair," cried one. "We didn't know," protested another. "Please tell her I still want to work with her," begged a third. The waitress struggled to keep up, her translations coming quickly now. But the CEO remained composed, answering each plea with cutting precision. To the excuses, she said, "Ignorance is not innocence." To the protests, she said, "Respect delayed is still disrespect." To the desperate pleas, she said, "Partnerships are built on trust, and tonight you have failed the simplest test of all." The waitress's voice grew hoarse as she repeated these words, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. By the time the CEO fell silent, the once proud table of leaders looked like scolded children. Their suits and titles could not protect them from the truth. And through it all, the waitress stood by her side, the invisible worker who had suddenly become indispensable. What had begun as a dinner of power was now a lesson none of them would forget. And it was only the beginning. The air inside the grand hall was heavy, almost suffocating. The chandeliers sparkled above, but no one admired their glow anymore. The billionaires who once sat tall in their chairs now leaned forward, desperate, restless, their pride chipped away. But the CEO was unmoved. She sat straight, her dark suit perfectly pressed, her expression calm yet unreadable. Every detail about her presence screamed power, the kind that couldn't be bought, only earned. The waitress swallowed hard. She had never thought her knowledge of Korean, something she had practiced quietly during late nights after shifts, would suddenly place her at the center of the most important dinner of the year. The CEO turned to her once more, speaking softly in Korean. The waitress translated carefully. She says she will give this room one last chance. She asks, who here is willing to step forward, not with words, but with action? The table erupted into whispers. Action? What did she mean? Some guests muttered, others fidgeted nervously. The French investor shook his head. This is absurd. We came here for business, not for games, he muttered again. But the CEO's sharp eyes fixed on him. And though she said nothing, the weight of her gaze silenced him immediately. Finally, a woman from Singapore, one of the few female investors in the room, slowly stood. Her voice trembled, but she spoke sincerely. Tell her I will learn, not just tonight, not just for business, but because respect matters. If she will give me the chance, I'll prove it. The waitress translated. For the first time, the CEO's stern mask cracked just slightly. She gave a faint nod. She says, the waitress relayed, that respect shown with humility is the first step. She will remember your words. The rest of the table grew restless. None of them wanted to lose favor, but most hesitated to humble themselves in such a way. Billionaires were not used to asking for chances. They were used to demanding them. But tonight, the rules had changed. The Dubai billionaire leaned forward again, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Please, tell her I will hire a full Korean team tomorrow morning. I'll make sure every single document, every presentation, every call is translated and respected. I swear it. The waitress translated, her tone calm but firm. The CO listened quietly, her face unreadable. Her reply came sharp and fast. She says, you think respect is paperwork. It isn't. Respect is not an accessory you hire when convenient. It's a language you live every day. She says your promise means nothing if it starts only after tonight. The Dubai billionaire's shoulders slumped. He had no answer. The room fell into silence again, thick with shame. Then, without warning, the CEO rose to her feet. The movement was graceful yet commanding, drawing every pair of eyes in the hall. She didn't raise her voice, but her words carried like thunder. The waitress translated each one, steady but shaken by their power. She says this dinner was never about signing contracts. It was a mirror. She wanted to see who you are when the rules are not in your favor. She says now she knows. Murmurs rippled around the table. Some lowered their heads, unable to meet her gaze. The CEO looked around the room slowly, then continued. She says she will not sign with those who showed disrespect tonight. She says she does not need all of you. She needs only the few who understand that respect is the real foundation of power. Her eyes drifted toward the Singaporean investor, who sat straighter now, pride in her chest. The rest of the room felt the ground shift beneath them. For the first time, their billions, their titles, their influence, all seemed worthless in the face of a truth they had ignored for too long. The waitress stood silently by her side, translating every word. Her palms were sweaty, her throat dry, but she kept her voice steady. She knew this moment mattered. And then, something unexpected happened. The CEO turned to her directly and spoke in a softer tone. She says, the waitress whispered aloud, her voice trembling, that I have more courage than anyone else in this room. She says I listen when no one else would. She says true leadership sometimes comes from the places no one expects. The entire table froze. The billionaires, people who had dominated industries, governments, and global markets, now looked toward the young waitress with expressions ranging from disbelief to envy. The host of the evening finally stepped forward, his face pale. This is madness, he stammered. She cannot dismiss the world's most powerful investors over something as trivial as language. The CEO's reply came swift and merciless, and the waitress translated without hesitation. She says language is never trivial. Language is identity, culture, and dignity. She says if you cannot see that, then you are not powerful. You are empty. The host stumbled back into his chair, humiliated. The CEO straightened her blazer, her voice calm again. She says his dinner is over. She has made her decision. Gasps filled the room. Some billionaires stood, shouting protests. Others begged her to reconsider. A few stormed out in anger, unwilling to face the sting of rejection. But the CEO ignored them all. Instead, she turned once more to the waitress. She says, the young woman translated, her own voice catching, that I should walk with her. The words hit her like a thunderclap. Me? The waitress asked softly, almost to herself. The CEO simply nodded. The hall erupted again, but this time in outrage. This is outrageous, the French investor bellowed. She's choosing a waitress over us? Another scoffed. This is humiliation, shouted the German executive. But the CEO's footsteps echoed steadily as she walked toward the exit, the waitress trailing uncertainly behind her. The murmurs and shouts faded behind them, replaced by the quiet hush of the corridor. The golden light seemed softer here, the chaos of the dinner left behind. The waitress finally found her voice. Why me? She whispered, her heart still racing. I'm just a server. I don't belong in there with people like you. The CEO stopped. Slowly, she turned to face her, her eyes calm and certain. In Korean, she spoke words that the waitress didn't need to translate. She understood them perfectly. You listened. 2 simple words, but they carried more weight than all the billions in that room. The night outside was cool when they stepped through the Grand Hotel doors. The city stretched before them, alive with lights and motion. For the waitress, everything had changed. She had walked into her shift that evening expecting another long night of serving wine and clearing plates. Now, she walked beside one of the most powerful women in the world. And though she didn't yet know it, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her place in a world far bigger than she ever imagined. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. And sometimes the test isn't for the powerful at all. It's for the ones they overlook. The hotel doors shut behind them, muting the clamor of powerful men scrambling to save face. Outside, the night stretched wide. City lights flickered against the polished glass towers. Cars rolled past with a constant hum, and a faint breeze carried the smell of roasted chestnuts from a vendor nearby. The CEO didn't stop walking. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble steps as she descended, head held high, posture regal, as though she had rehearsed this exit 1,000 times. The waitress followed, half a step behind, still clutching the hem of her apron like a shield. Her heart thudded in her chest. She had no idea why she was out here. She had no idea why this billionaire, a woman powerful enough to own half the skyline, had chosen her of all people to walk beside. But she couldn't turn back now. "Why did you take me with you?" the waitress finally asked, her voice small, hesitant. The CEO didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowed her stride, turning toward the street as if weighing her words. When she finally spoke, her Korean flowed like water, deliberate and heavy. "You spoke when no one else would." The waitress translated softly to herself, lips barely moving. "You gave me a voice." The billionaire stopped at the edge of the curb. A black sedan was waiting, sleek and silent, its driver already rushing to open the door. But she didn't step inside. Instead, she looked at the waitress, studying her with a kind of gaze that peeled away fear and hesitation. "What is your name?" she asked. "Amara," the waitress said quickly. Her voice cracked, betraying her nerves. "Amara," the CEO repeated, as though testing its strength. "Do you know how rare it is to find someone brave enough to stand against a room full of men who think they own the world?" Amara blinked, unsure how to respond. She wanted to say it wasn't bravery, that it had been instinct, that she hadn't thought, she had just acted. But the CEO's words wrapped around her like armor. "Bravery," Amara whispered, "isn't what I felt. I just couldn't stand watching them dismiss you." The CEO's eyes softened, just a fraction, just enough to show that beneath her unshakable exterior was a woman who had fought too many battles alone. "They will talk about tonight," she said finally. "They will twist it, call me arrogant, ungrateful, impossible. They will say I walked away from opportunity. But you," she paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You saw me." Amara felt a lump rise in her throat. The driver cleared his throat, glancing nervously at the billionaire, but she raised a hand to silence him. She wasn't finished. "Tell me, Amara," she continued, "if you had been in my seat tonight, if every eye at that table had turned to you, waiting to judge you, dismiss you, what would you have done?" The question struck deep. Amara had no polished answer, no corporate script. She thought of her life, long shifts, bills piling up, customers who never learned her name. She thought of her grandmother, who had worked until her hands ached just to give Amara a chance to study. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think I would have wanted someone, anyone, to listen, just once." The CEO's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze grew warmer. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and then turned toward the car. "Get in," she said simply. Amara froze. What? "No, I can't. I'm just staff. The CEO cut her off with a single look. "You are not just anything. Not anymore." Reluctantly, Amara slid into the leather seat beside her. The city lights blurred past as the car pulled into the street. Inside the quiet cabin, the CEO spoke again, her words softer now, but edged with exhaustion. "All my life," she said in Korean, "I've had to prove myself in rooms like that. Rooms where they wait for me to fail, where they see a woman first and a leader second. Tonight was no different." Amara translated in her head, nodding slowly. She wanted to reach out, to say something comforting, but what comfort could a waitress offer to a billionaire? Still, she whispered, "Tonight was different, because they heard you. Through me, maybe, but they heard you." The CEO's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Exactly. Through you." The weight of those words lingered. Amara stared at her hands, realizing she had stepped into something far bigger than herself. The car slowed to a stop outside a towering skyscraper, glass and steel rising like a monument against the night sky. The CEO's company headquarters. The driver hurried to open the door. Before stepping out, the billionaire looked at Amara once more. "Come upstairs. There is something you should see." The elevator ride was silent, save for the softened machinery. Amara's nerves buzzed with each passing floor. By the time they reached the top, her palms were damp with sweat. The doors opened to a vast office, walls of glass revealing the glittering city below. It felt like standing in the sky. Every inch of the space spoke of power. Polished wood, minimalist decor, shelves lined with awards. But what caught Amara's eye wasn't the wealth. It was the photographs. Dozens of frames lined one wall, showing the CEO at different stages of her life. A young girl in a school uniform, a university graduate with tired eyes, a woman standing proudly in front of her first small office, and then images of boardrooms, contracts, victories hard won. Amara stepped closer, captivated. The CEO joined her, arms crossed. "Do you see these?" she asked. "Every photo is a reminder of what they said I could not do. Every smile hides the battles I had to fight just to stand where I stand." Amara swallowed hard, the weight of it sinking in. "And tonight," the CEO continued, "I nearly lost my patience. I nearly let them take my voice again. But then," she turned, meeting Amara's gaze. "You gave it back to me?" Amara shook her head quickly. "I didn't do anything. I just translated." "No," the CEO said firmly. "You believed. And belief is rarer than gold in this world." Silence stretched between them, charged and fragile. Amara realized then that this woman, feared and admired by so many, was still searching for something deeper than contracts and investments. Connection, respect, a listener. For the first time all night, Amara allowed herself to breathe. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of the story now, woven into something that would ripple far beyond this evening. But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. What about you? If you were Amara, would you have spoken up in that room full of billionaires, risking your job and reputation? Or would you have stayed silent? Backhand index pointing right, drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. Backhand index pointing right. And if you want to see how this story unfolds, make sure to subscribe to RES Stories so you don't miss the next part. Backhand index pointing right, don't forget to like and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes one voice can change everything.